All right, welcome back. In this training, we're going to focus on all the features that we can use with these licenses, or as many as we can get to, including generating a new key. We're going to check activation and actually how do we reset the key. So in the last training, we showed you how we could create these licenses from an order and also how we could get these orders and the license number here inside our application. Now we select a license, we want to know all the information. We showed how we can get these. Notice that there's no machine ID and they haven't been activated yet. But what about when we want to activate a specific license? Well, of course, that's on the user's end. So if they were to copy this license number, and let's say we go inside, remember inside our developers, we have a registration test here. Now inside the user, if they register, clear that out, and they want to activate their license, what they'll do is they'll just paste this in there, regardless of the version, and they'll click activate. And what that's going to do is activate them. They won't see this developer sheet screen, it's just typed. They'll get a message saying your license has been activated, thank you, or whatever you want to do. Their license is now activated. And so what we want to do as developers, we want to know what's been activated, when it's been activated, and how. We want all that information to be brought back into our application. So how are we going to do that? So here inside the application, we have the information. Now all we need to do is just click sync orders again and everything's going to come back. Selecting on that same order, we now see that it has now been activated. Notice we've got a machine ID, which is my machine ID here. It's now activation. We know it's 1 of 1. There's no more activation. If the user tries to go back and activate that one more time using the same, it's now reached the limit, so they're not going to be able to do that. If I were to go back in here, test that, and try to activate, here's the same one, copy and paste. Same one. If I activate that, we're going to get a message letting us know that it's been this registration key has already been used. You've been exceeded the number of machines for this. Please enter a new key. Now, what if we want to do this? What if we want to issue a customer a brand new one? Well, we can do that. In fact, we can do a lot of things with the licenses with the API. Let's look at some information about this API. If we go into the software add-on, this is the API that we're using. It's part of the WooCommerce. That's what we've brought back. It's the WooCommerce documents here. We can see it here. And we just look for the software add-on here. We can find it there under the WooCommerce. And that software add-on is going to tell us what kind of features. So what does that API provide? What functionality can we do? Well, it goes into information about creating a new product. We went over this already about how to add the software information. So we did that, product ID, manage tools. But what I really want to focus on now is the actual API, the things that we can do from behind the scenes, because we've already done this. And also, I just wanted to show you before that, let's look in here, the dashboard. I want to show you one more thing before we get into that, in case we didn't go over it yet. WooCommerce license keys. I wanted to show you this. These are all, I think we went over it, but these are all the license keys that have been generated. Notice the license key, whether it's been used or not, the activation limit, there's 0. There's 0 activations remaining. Of course, we can sort by order ID. So this is the last one, right? We can generate new ones if we want to. Here we can create everything. So everything's got those have no order ID. So let's go. Here we go. Here's the ones we just created. 305. Those are the ones we created. Notice that we have activations remaining, and we just activated this one, so there's nothing remaining. So we've got some information here. It's located here in the WooCommerce license. So this is kind of the back end, but we don't really need this because we've got our own. So it's here. So what do we have to do? Here's the API. This is what I really want to focus on here. So here's our example code. So basically all the API, the calls to the API are going to be, this is like what we know as a webhook. Basically, all we need to focus on is this part. It's going to be this part, which is going to be our specific website host, right? In this case, not local host, it's going to be our website, WooCommerce, then the question mark. Then we want WC-API, so that's important. Software, again, software API. So we want all this information up to request. Now the request, this particular part is going to change. So everything up to here is going to be the same, except the only difference is this is going to be your domain, not localhost. It's going to be your domain. Okay, so you'll see it in the examples, my code. Then the difference is equals, then here, in this case, request keys or request, whatever we want the action to perform is going to be here. So what are some of those actions? Well, one is generate keys. So what do we need? If I want to generate key, I'm going to send a webhook to this, and it's got some required information. So I need the secret key. Remember that secret key when we designed it. What is that? Let's just take a quick look at that so we refresh our memory. Inside the products here, and then all products, we have a secret key assigned to each product inside there. So when we edit a specific product here, and then we want to go into the software tab. So we scroll down here, we're going to look at the software tab. There's a secret key. So this secret key is here. We also have that secret key. Remember, it's also synced with our products here. So inside our, let's close this. Actually, we don't need this, so I'm going to close it out. We don't need that, and we don't need to save it. Okay, so I'm going over to the products. We see we've got a secret key specifically for that. We've already have that information on a per product basis, so we're hanging on to that. So we're going to need that. That is required. So what else do we need? Well, we also need, let's take a look here, the email. And we need the product ID. This is the name ID. Now this gets a little bit confusing, so I want to make sure we have those two because it does get a little bit confusing. Inside the product, right, we have a product name ID. This here I'm calling name ID because there's actually a product ID here. This is also, this number here, 39, that's really what I call the product ID. So I'm going to call this the name ID. It's kind of confusing, I know, because the software has its own product ID, which is the name that you assign. You don't want to change this, keep it consistent. This is the prefix key. This is very important. This is going to let us know what they're registering, right? Notice that when we purchased this, every single key had the 3 at the beginning. That's based on it. That's what every license generated had that already. So we need to know the product name. We'll call this product name ID, right? If we look in the information, the ID used for the license. So this has a unique ID used for the license. So we need that information. So we need all 4 of those things. Optional, we have the order ID. Well, I like to also add an order ID. This way we can assign a specific license to a specific order. Version, key prefix, and activations may or may not be as important when we're generating a key. If we want to know how many activations that we want, certainly we should do that. So how can that be beneficial to us? If I want to generate a key, right, and I look back into our license manager and I want to click generate a new key, it's going to say set the number of activations. So if I want to set 3 activations, click OK. That's automatically going to generate a new key based on the selected order. So now we have more new keys based on this order. So here we go. So that's all we have to do. Again, here we go. Now we have a brand new license key. We have 3 activations on this. This way, if we want to send this to a customer, we now have 3. They can activate this 3 different times for the single license. So we can do that directly from Excel. So let's just, before we go over how we do that, I want to go over some of the other options while we're on the screen. What other things? We can activate a license. We know this already. We did this actually already inside our software, inside our application, our Excel accounting application. We did that. We ran this activating it using the email, the license key, and the product key. So we're actually activated. We did go over that in the code. This part we went over inside, though. This particular part is going to be the code that's distributed inside your distributed applications. You will be activating it because behind the scenes we can activate it. So we also want to activate reset. Why would this be helpful? Well, it could be helpful if the customer says, hey, they email you, they say, you know what, I changed computers or my computer broke. I need to reset this activation. So what you can do is you can turn off the old license and reset it. You can reset. So this activation reset call deactivates all uses of a single license, right? And the call must be contain email address, of course, activation reset. So it must start out with activation reset. Includes the email, the license key, and the product ID. Those are all required and you can deactivate. What about deactivate? We can also deactivate. So basically, what is this one going to do? Activation reset. So what it's going to do, if this is, let's say this one here, let's say this is one, and I want to reset this license using this. I haven't done the macro yet on this. We'll get to that next week. But if I want to reset, basically it's going to clear out the machine ID. It's going to set this back to 0 to 1, and then they're going to be able to, you can then say, okay, you can now use that same, you can email the customer back and say, okay, you can now use the same license key to register on your new machine. So they're going to register it, their new machine ID will come here, and their activation limit will change here. So if you add the email automation onto it, it's going to be super simple and automated. That's the whole point. We want this process automated as possible and give you as the developer a lot of power to control the licensing. So what else do we have? So we have deactivation. If a customer stops paying, you can deactivate. This deactivation API call deactivates a single use of a license. So we must call the email to contain the license key, and the instance. If you have a specific instance, then it's going to be, otherwise it'll optionally cancel out. So you can deactivate a specific license. That could be very helpful. The optional instance, and this pass, basically what you have, let's say you have 3 activations in one license, you could theoretically deactivate a single instance of a single license, or you could deactivate all instances of a license. We can also run a license check. We'll check to see if a license has been activated, and it'll let us know if it's been activated or not, and then it'll let us know how many activations. It'll return that information. So those are all the things that we have at our disposal for a specific license. Now we're going to go over some of the instances of how we can implement them inside our application. And so for of course, the check here, we can click check activation, and we're going to see this license key is active with a total of 1 keys activated out of total 1 possible registration. Would you like to update your records? And our records are already updated, so we click no. If we click on one that hasn't been, we see check activations here, total of 0 keys activated out of 1. So it's going to let us know based on information from the website, which is really important. It's going to check that server and check the website. So how do we do all this? How do we generate a key? How do we check the activation? How do we do all this? Well, let's go ahead inside the code, and we're going to go through it a little bit step by step. Inside here, so we're going to focus on the licensing macros. That's really what I want to put some focus on here. And also, we've already gone over here this licensing refresh list. So, but how do we generate a key? Well, the best way to generate a key is we need to make sure that we require keys. If we remember correctly, to generate a key, we need some specific information that is required. We need 4 things. We need the request to be generated key. We need the secret key. We need the email, and we need the product ID. So we need all that information in order to generate a key, and possibly here an order ID. I would like an order ID. If we've selected in a specific order, for example, if I've selected on what order, I want to generate the key based on that specific order. If I select this key and I want to generate a new key, when I want to know, let's say, just 1 activation, I want to make sure that we do that and generate that. Now what we've done is generated a brand new key, so we have it up here. So it's based on a specific order. So if we've selected an order, I'm going to generate a new key based on that order. So again, let's go inside the macro and take a look. We need some required fields. We need to make sure that we have B4, that we have actually a specific order. If we don't, then we cannot move on. B4 is going to tell us that. It's going to give us that order row here. Inside B4 here, that's going to tell us the database row. Without a database row with original order, we cannot move on. So that's required. We need to make the user. Also, we need to make sure that we actually have an existing customer, and that's going to be an I4. I4 is going to let us know that customer database row the customer located in I4, that customer ID here. Customer ID is required. So we also want to know if we have an existing product. So B6 is our product row here, and that's of course going to be based on a match formula based on N6, and that's going to look up that specific product ID from all of our products database here. So we want to make sure that we have a row associated with that product here. Okay, so assuming that we do have a product row, then we can move on. And our next line to check is we want to make sure that we have an existing email. G8 is going to hold our email. That's going to be our customer email. We need that there to generate that. Without that email, and we cannot have that. Once we know that we have the email, we want to make sure that we have a domain. Now I've put the domain here, which is going to be really helpful. So inside the admin settings, I've added a new feature called domain. So this way we have a dynamic. So you can put your website domain in here, and you can have it here. So all I did was put this temporary website domain here, and then we can use that so we can then generate a variable based on this domain. So we have that here, and I've also given it a named range called domain. Okay, so when we have that, we need to check for that to make sure domain is accurate. It's not empty. If it is, we can move on. Okay, then what I want to do is I want to determine the activation limit. When I'm generating a new license, I want to know how many times the user can activate that license. So we're going to use an input box to do just that. So the input box is going to be, please set the number of activations allowed for this new license key. And we're going to set the number of activations, okay? Then, of course, if the activation limit equals 0, then exit the sub, right? It's going to give us ability for the user to access. We're going to put that in a variable called activation limit. Also, we need the order row based on B4, the order ID, L5, customer ID I4, the product row, the row that the product database located here in B6. I need the secret key. Where am I going to find that secret key? I'm going to find that inside the database, the product database located right here. That secret key is located right here in column L. So as long as we know the product row, we can then extract that secret key located in column L. And then we do just that inside the code here in L. And the product name ID, I'm calling it the name ID also, that's going to be located in column J of the database. I need that name ID. I need to make sure that that is here. And we also want to make sure you do not change the name of these. It could create issues, or we have to update the database. Now notice if you do create and update that, it'll update automatically. When we make a product update, it'll update it automatically. But it's better not to do it, because if you want to set those product names inside the user licensing so that when they license it, it's based on a product name. So once you set a product name, it's best to keep it that way, keep it that name and not change it. Otherwise you can create issues. So we have a product name and product name ID here, and that's based on the product. Okay, so when we license it, it's based on this. So we need that name so we can register it based on a specific product. Email located in G8 and the site domain. Once we have all those variables, we're going to create an object just as we do all the time. We're going to set the URL. Again, now it's going to start from the site domain. We've already defined the site domain here. So it's based on the domain that you set. We've got the site domain. And, right, remember this site domain includes the backslash, so that is important, that backslash. That's already located here inside our domain, or it's at the /, I don't know, either one. Forward, back, it depends on which direction you're facing, I guess. Okay, so assuming that we have that domain, we can then move on. We have that question mark inside the URL. We also add that, remember, that additional information all the way up to here, all the way up to the request. That is the same information that I went over with you inside that API right up here. It's that same information from the question mark all the way up to the request, right? Request equals. Now the type of request is going to change. So basically all we did was copy this information and bring it directly inside the code here. Then in this case, what we want to do is generate a key, right? Generate the key is the one we're going to be doing based on that API that they've requested us that we do. We're going to use the generate key here. Then all we need to add is to make sure the secret key, the email, product date, and in this case, I also want to add the order ID. So that's just what we're going to do. Inside the request, we're going to be based on that information, based on their specific prefixes, exactly as the way they have it here. We're going to do it inside our request string right here. So we want the secret key equal to the variable, the secret key. We want the email to equal the email. And make sure your and is for the string, but make sure that and is the separator between, right, different fields. You need to use that and has to be in the string. Equals is going to separate the field label from the field value. Field label here, field value here. And the order ID, I'm adding the order ID, and I also want to know the number of activations. How many activations have we set? We've asked the user in a pop-up input box what those numbers are, and we're going to do that. We could easily just add it in here or anywhere we could add it in, but I just decided to do it there. So we had all that. That activation limit is going to let us know. So we also have the number of activations. So of all these, we can also put a version if we want to, and also a key prefix if we want to. We can use this for anything. The key prefix is something that's going to be based on the product. So we probably want, when we generate the key, we probably want to add the same key prefix that we do when we generate that specific product. Okay, so that's going to be very, very important. If we specify a product, that's going to be important. So in case we want to do that, it's going to be that product. If we specified a product, which we did, we specified this product name here. Now that product name already has a prefix assigned to it. That's why the one we just generated already has 3, right? That product, notice that each one already has the 3 attached. That 3 is based on the product already. So everyone's going to start with 3. Now, when you use, I'm just going to go briefly. Let's go inside. That was a license here. Let's go inside here. Now, what I wanted to do is inside the product, we have that prefix 3 here. But your key prefix should be very more complicated, not something basic. But remember this, when we use our key prefix, right, it is this prefix, when we look at it, when our VBA looks at a specific prefix, it starts out with a prefix, it's going to know what version to activate. I'm going to show you that again because it's very, very important. I'm going to pull up the accounting application, and then let's just save our work here, and because I want to show you that specific inside the file, because very, very important, how that key prefix defines what version you're going to allow, what you're going to allow the user to do, and that comes in the activation. So when we go into the, let's say the developers here in the Visual Basic, I want to do the application licensing here. This is the one I'm focused on. So when we register, when we're registering application, the license key, we've defined the license key here. Once it gets results, once it gets issued, we are going to determine down here based on, remember here, we have the left portion here. This is check for version and add licensing. If it's a 1, then it's going to be single user. If it's 2, right, you can use case studies. So all you need to do inside your program is add, like you could do 1, 2, whatever you want to do. This prefix, like let's say you're going to say the first 6 digits are going to be based on that. So you change this to 6. So I want to know the first left position of the first 6 or whatever you decide to do. It is this key prefix that inside the license that's going to let us know what version, right? What version. So we only had 2, right? So keep that in mind. This key prefix here that you allow inside your code should match the versions inside that you've set up inside your key prefix for this specific product right here. Okay, keep that in mind, that key prefix. So you don't want the same, but don't put it simple like 3. Make it more complex. You can use letters, numbers, whatever you want. Just make sure they match and make sure it doesn't change, because when you distribute these applications, you want to make sure to do that. Okay, I really wanted to bring up that point with that key prefix. So now we can move forward because that's very, very important. All right, so continuing on in our code, now let's go back into the application where we were. Whoa, let's close this out. We don't need that anymore. And now back inside the licensing macros here. So we've got the product name. That's going to help us determine what the prefix is. So we've got the order ID and everything. Once we send that information, we can determine the result. So if the result equals key ID equals 0, that means there's no key ID. If the result doesn't include that, the license is not created. Please check your domain, right? Because every result. So when I run that, let's go ahead and run this code right now. I'll select something and generate that key. Right here, select on something. I'm going to generate the key, and I'm just going to put in 2. It's going to stop that code right where we stopped it here. And of course, we can take a look at the result. The result is here, key equals, and then we've got a whole key, right? And then a key ID. We don't really use the key ID, but I'm going to use the words key ID. If I know that that result contains the word key ID, then I know it's correct, and I know there's an accurate key. If it doesn't, then something went wrong. So if the string result key ID equals 0, then the license is not created. Please check, maybe there's some issue with the domain or the product name. Keep in mind the product name can create, I had a few issues because I changed the product name a few times. So if it's not registering, it's probably because your product name is incorrect. So what do you do? What do you do if it's not right? Well, you check. The first thing what I want to do is I want to check inside here. I want to know what product name we're using, right? This is the product name here when we're registering it. When you want to check the license to make sure, you're going to go inside the licensing here. Inside, let's go back to the licensing where we had the license key here. You can double check the product name here. Here's the software. They call it product ID. I'm calling it product name because it gets confusing. Okay, so check it to make sure that this accounting application is equal to the product name. If you run into trouble, it's probably most likely going to be because of incorrect product name. So our product name inside our code is coming directly from our database. So our product name ID is coming directly from the product database. So you want to make sure that they match, right? That any issue here and you change it, it's going to probably be because of the product name. All right, so we've got that. We don't understand the product name. So, but assuming that it is correct, you're going to get it correct, and then you can continue on. So now you just get a new license was created. All right, good. So we know that that's how to create a license. So we continue down here. We do want to check to make sure if it contains the word key ID, we are good to go. Okay, so what do we want to do after that? Well, then what I want to do is I want to extract the license key. In fact, let me just take a quick look at this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run that one more time, but what I want to do is I want that text inside something here so we can actually see the text before we actually have to parse it. So what I'm going to do is, let's take a look. No, this is not something else. So I'm going to put it in B14. I want that result to come in B14 so we can actually see it. So after we get that result, all we need to do is just say, and then dot range B14 equals the result. Okay, so we run that again, and then all we need to do is just set the parameters here and then click OK, and it's going to run it. It's going to generate our key, and it's going to put that result right in B14. Now we can look at that. Let's take a look at the result. So what I want to do, basically, I want to extract this specific key from everything. I want to extract all of that. Basically, that's all I want is that key ID, but I need to make sure it's going to have the key ID, the words key ID. Once I know it does, then all I need to do is extract it. And we can do that using a few commands. So how are we going to do it? Well, the first thing that I'm going to do is license key. Let's get out of here. Let's get out of this cell here. I should probably close that. We might need it again, so I'll keep that open as far as registering it. All right, so inside our code, the first thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the replace. And I want to replace what? I want to replace all of the first part of it. What is that first part? Well, that first part is this key. I want to take all of this part, key, and this everything, and I want to replace it with nothing, right? So, but how do we get that? So keep in mind that we can't use the quotation mark. So if I want to replace this here, let's copy paste that in here with a comment. If I want to replace this bracket, every time there's an instant quotation mark, I need to replace it with and. Then I want character 34 and. So I need to replace it with this right here. Notice this, and character 34 and. Every time you see these quotation marks here, replace it with this, because character 34 is the quotation marks. So all I need to do is basically just copy this right here inside the replace. We're going to take our result. I want to find this and I want to replace it with nothing. So all I did was every instance of the quotation mark, I just basically replaced it with the character 34. That's all I did here. So that's going to take this first part of it and replace it with nothing. So now that we've stripped out the first part, how do we strip out the last part? Well, we do the same thing. This time I'm going to use the left. All right. In this case, I want the left in string. I want to know remove the remaining key character. So I only want to keep the left position of something, right? Now that I've removed it, what do I want? I want to keep this part here. Okay, so let's assume we've already removed this first part of it with that first line of code. And what's left? I want the left position of this, but how do I know all that? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for key ID, and then I'm going to remove everything to the right of that. And that's going to leave me with just that key code here. So that's exactly what I'm doing here. So I'm using the left position of the entire string. We've already updated it. I'm going to use in-string. I'm going to find that key ID, and I'm going to subtract 4 because I need to move back 4. Why do I need to move back 4? Because I need to take this key ID and I need to go back 1, 2, 3, and 4 to set us that. That's going to set us, it's going to find the key ID here. Just give me back 1, 2, 3, 4. That's it right there. So it's going to bring it back. Once I have that, it's going to find that. It's going to remove everything else. It's going to get that left position. That's it. That's going to remove the remaining characters. So that's all we have to do to extract that license key. Once I have that license key, then I can do a few things with it. Well, what I want to do, I want to determine the license row. Where is that located? I want to get the first available license row. And then I want to create a brand new license. So once we've created it, we need to store that license data, and we need to store that in the license database here. So I need to bring that all the way down here and find the first available row and put in all the information here. I don't like this. Let's just center that so it looks a little bit better. All right, so, and then do it once more. Okay, so now that we have that, what I want to do is I want to get the first row, and I want to put all the information from the order in here. So that's just what we do with the remaining lines of code. So in A goes, of course, the next license ID. We determine the first row. We set the order ID in B. We set the registration date, the customer ID located in D, the customer email in E, and then F. Of course, we're going to probably do the license key itself. It's going to go in G. The activation limit, the status is pending. We just created it, so it's pending. And the license row we're going to create inside there. All right, so then what I want to do is I want to run the macro that's going to refresh those licenses. We did go over that briefly. That just basically takes out the license, runs them through the advanced filter based on that specific order ID, and refreshes them. Then I want to make sure I want to select the first range. If I ran that refresh, let me just show you that right here. If I ran that refresh, what I want to do is, since remember we're sorting them from the newest down to the oldest, right? It's going to be based on the database row, actually, in this case. When we run that license database, let's pull it up right up here. I want to select the new one, the registration ID. Sorry, it's sorted based on the registration ID, right? That's why we have the ID. So I'm going to run that based on that. Remember that? We sort it with the oldest one here. So the one that we just created is going to have that newest registration ID. That's the one we created right here. So descending, we're going to sort it. So that way I want to select the first one. What that's going to do when I create a brand new one, it's going to select this one. The one that you just created, it's going to be selected here. So we can easily see it and we can work with that. Okay, so that's all we do. We're going to select, but I only want to select that if for some reason the current sheet is the license manager. So we just run a check. And the reason this prevents bugs, because if I try to select a specific range in a sheet that's not active, it's going to create a bug. So we just want to make sure that the active sheet is license manager. And then we just need to let the user know a new license key has been generated. And then we want to put G4 and G6. What is that going to do? That's going to be putting the specific here inside G4 for for customer, and then the last name I just want to put. So we can, when we generate a new key, we just click here and it's put the license number, and then the message box that pops up is going to say a new license key generated for Randy Austin. All right, good. I'm glad we got to do that. In the next training, we're going to try to get to emails, but we should be able to do the check activation, which is very simple. We'll go over it and we'll go over it next week. And also what I want to do is deactivate and reset license key. We're going to focus on those, and we're going to give the new email templates. We're going to get started on that. All right, thanks so much for joining me. We're out of time this week, and we'll see you next week.